Welcome, everyone. So open source is a no-brainer. Actually, that's false. Doing open source well and growing a successful ecosystem around it, it requires, trust me, it requires a lot of brain power. It's hard and it does not come for free. Responding to questions, reviewing issues and code changes, organizing events, motivating people, it's a daily duty. And it takes investment, time, money, you name it. But with all things that produce value, especially in this case, tremendous value, it's totally worth doing. So open source, we know it's the best model that we've come up with for producing software. Do it poorly, though, and what you unleash onto the world amounts to little more than a code dump. Do it well, and your project, it develops a life and a culture of its own. So how do you do it? How do you grow, how do you give the project a spark? How do you grow it to 1,000, 10,000 users, many contributors? So I've cultivated very successful open source communities on sparse budgets, in some cases no budgets. Each experience has taught me lessons, and I'm here today to share them with you. And I'm really excited because I've waited a long time to tell this story. So I hope you'll be able to use this advice to make any type of community building efforts you're doing wildly successful. And for you to stand out from the crowd that doesn't do this so well. So perhaps it kind of goes without saying, but if you want to grow, you got to have an effort that is worth joining. How many projects have you come across and you just make you think, what in the heck are they trying to accomplish here? What is this for? I don't see the point. So don't be that project. You need to know your own purpose. Find your purpose and why do you exist? Because you're not going to build a community unless you really have a reason to do it. People need to know where you're headed. They need to have a vision that they can believe in. They need to get a sense of purpose, a rally call. We can say a raison d'etre. They want to be able to achieve something, that's bigger than themselves, something they can't achieve with themselves alone, so they join into a community. So you have to know what that is. The other thing you have to remember is that open source is created by people, individuals. So to grow open source, you have to understand what motivates people. You need to amp them up, so to speak. And in his book, Drive, Dan Pink identifies 3 key factors that basically drive people. And those are autonomy, mastery, and purpose, hence AMP. So participation in open source relies on this because it's voluntary. So you always have to remember and respect that aspect. But don't think that people are working for free, because that would be naive. They just aren't working for direct financial gain in the traditional model. You gave them money and you told them to go do something. So they're driven by something else, other purposes. People participate to do what they enjoy, what they love, far away from the crap that they don't. They participate to learn from each other, and they value each other's knowledge and to grow together. So that sense of growing up in a group. And they value the exchange of the ideas themselves that they're passing back and forth from each other. This is very important. But ultimately, all this stuff comes down to is they work for personal fulfillment. At least your audience does in open source. So in order to kind of tap into that, you have to craft a call to adventure for the community who becomes your hero. You want them to come and show up and go on an adventure. And your mission then becomes a story. It becomes your story, your project story. It shapes the culture of your community. It serves as a filter to help you decide, okay, what are we going to do? What's out of scope? And who are these people that are showing up? What makes them get up in the morning? So Dogfish Head, the brewing company, one of my favorites, has this fantastic tagline because it's so concise. Off-centered ales for off-centered people. So that's something that people can really rally around. Think about it. It has what they want to achieve. They don't want to create regular beers that everyone else creates. They want to create unique beers. They have a purpose. And it's an identity of the people that show up. They're off-centered people. What does that say? It sort of says, hey, listen, we get you. We know that you're not like everyone else. We see you as an individual. So that's the stuff that gets people behind you. So don't let people pass you by because you lack a purpose. Get noticed, have a purpose, have a raison d'etre, and then communicate it. The thing to keep in mind about this is that brilliant software alone is not enough to get people to act. Oftentimes engineers kind of get stuck in this thinking and say, my software is so brilliant that people are going to show up and they're going to love it. No, they're not. They don't care because they don't know. So to build a great community, you need to communicate. So community, notice, communicate. Your idea is going to be judged initially based on how well you said what it is that your idea was. There's this great quote that I came across by Carmen Gallo. It says, in a society that values speech free from esoteric, incomprehensible bullshit, okay, they're going to hear the jargon coming out of your mouth. So when I say communicate, what I'm really saying is your message needs to be organized, authentic, and empathetic. So when you create a new project on GitHub, you get this pop-up or this dialog box, and it says, help people interested in this repository, so interested in your project, understand. Why should they be there? Why do they need to know? What do they need to know about? The README isn't necessarily about all the technical things that it does. It's supposed to be your chance to motivate them. And then the user manual or whatever else can give them those details beyond that. But the README is about planning an idea in their hearts of something that doesn't exist and now they want to be a part of it. So help them understand, because only ideas that spread, only ideas that get understood are ideas that really have any legs. So to bring them in, you need to show up. So you need to communicate, but you have to be a person behind those words. So every project starts out as a ghost town, and you have to ask yourself, are you going to be a project that never picks up any activity and gets people behind it, or are you going to kind of flatline? So no activity to people, that signals a dead project. I mean, almost nowadays it's kind of a stigma that if you go to GitHub and you see last activity and, okay, this project's probably dead. 1 year ago, that's probably dead. So activity is a very, very, very important part of communicating that you're alive and you're doing something. Because people tend to get kind of aggressive when they notice that something is dead. It's sort of a natural human reaction to sort of kick something that isn't alive, because humans only know to respond to things that are alive. And they want to see that something, it responds to external forces. So that can often be a problem for growing a new community. If you don't have activity, people get aggressive right away. So what you want is, instead of flatlining, we want to have regular, steady intervals of activity, whatever it is. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but you want to communicate with the community through this activity. Be on, be everywhere. Communicate openly to a fault. So a great way to get information out there is to say, hey, I need to make a decision, so just start talking about it online. Use everything open, because if you're open, it generates activity. So that's a very important thing. But also take the time to meet with the community, get to know the individuals. Make them feel like you have all the time in the world for every single one of them. The best manager I ever had did this exactly for me. It didn't matter if we were in the middle of a production fire. If I said to him, hey, I need to talk to you, he would say, production fire can be dealt with later. What do you need to talk about? And that's a very, very important message. And I respected that too, and that I didn't spend too much time with him, because I knew there were other things to do. So you want to make each person the center of attention. Because in the end, communication is the water, the synapses that make up the activity in your project. And they make that communication flowing readily through your project is healthy for your project. But also remember that communication is two-way. So it's not always you talking. I mean, okay, so today it's just I'm talking to you, but I'm going to go home and listen. Because really, in an open source, we're taking advantage of this idea that, hey, there are a lot of people here. Collective thinking, power in numbers. You can't leverage power in numbers if you aren't listening. They have the secret to what can make you great. So to realize that power, make communication extremely easy. One of the main reasons I really love GitHub Issues is because it's so easy to just get my thoughts out there in a very contextual way without blasting out an entire mailing list. And so each of the issues have their own channel, so to speak. And I can work on that one channel, and we can be in close contact. So Matt Ridley actually has this very great quote in this TED Talk he gave. What's relevant to a community, and think about this for a second, is how well people are communicating their ideas, not how clever any individual is. Okay? The clever individual thing, that's proprietary software. We're not interested in that. What we're interested in is the collective of all the great ideas that are out there, but we're not going to get any of those ideas if we're not communicating. So I think that part of getting them to speak, getting them to come forward with these ideas, because if we're going to build on ideas, we need to hear them, is that you want to show them that you want them there. Show them that you actually want to grow, that it's not just you and you're kind of annoyed when people come by like, oh, don't bother me, because I've had that experience in open source projects. You want to make the communication personal and respect. This is a very important thing. Think about this. Respect that they came and they shared what is now an irretrievable slice of their life with your project. They can never have that part of their life back. So when that's met with hostility, that can be a very, very damaging thing. So we'll get into more of that in a bit. Now, communication doesn't necessarily have to mean a lot of words, okay? So I've talked about it being listening, but when you're talking back, hey, listen, there's only so much energy all of us have during a day. So +1 says, hey, I'm present, I support this, and it also provides encouragement, which we'll talk about a bit later. You can also communicate simply through like commits of docs and code. I've talked about this before. Like you committing is actually you talking. I mean, you don't think of it that way, but it really is, because they come from the other side and they see that activity behind the project, and they know this project is being maintained. So be transparent. That's the other thing. This is probably the most important, in my mind, this is the most important thing in open source, especially if you're a company or you're a large organization running a project. Be honest, transparent, and frank. Share everything, communicate transparently, just be real and human, okay? Because humans have an unbelievable ability to recognize fake behavior, words, non-authentic things. And frankly, if you're that, you're dead to them. They don't care. They want to connect to a human. Even if you're a large company, they want to find a human within the company to connect to. So leave discussions about your product out of the community. If it's not related to the community, leave it out of the community. Contribution should be good for the good of the project, and you should be focused on the project, not self-centered on your needs. When you're doing community, do a community 100%. Don't do this halfway crap, okay? Because the thing is, then don't do it, because you're not going to get any success. So if you're working for a company that sponsors an open source project, for instance, be very aware that when you get caught on the inside, so they don't hear from you for a while. Like they hear from you, they love your project, and then all of a sudden nothing for a while. That speaks volumes even though you're saying nothing. It's the quickest way for people to disassociate. So in the end, for this section, show up and communicate. Because when you show up, you're there and they're there and you get to know them. And they cease to be outsiders and instead you're drawing them in. Now, speaking of drawing them in, you always want to make sure that you're making people feel welcome. Be all-inclusive to anyone that really wants to come and join your project. What you want to create is a safe space for people with ideas, and there's these budding ideas that are very delicate, like little flames, in the beginning that you're trying to make a flame with sticks. It's very delicate in the beginning. You kind of have to give it encouragement. So you want to make sure that in the beginning, that's easy to get into. Now, on the other side of things, remember this. The very first touch that a person has in a project, that's them testing you. Okay? You have to realize that you're being tested. As soon as you see someone for the very first time, they have a question, whatever it is, they want to see how you respond. They're testing. They're going to, if this response is good, I'll consider this community. If it's bad, I'm out. I can go anywhere else. Okay? They don't have to be in your community. So, and people are going to have tons and tons of questions. Lots of them. Questions are interest. This is great. Okay, think about this. Even the questions that seem like the dumbest questions mean, hey, I'm kind of interested in your project. I didn't know exactly how to ask a good question, but I'm interested. I'm here, right? That irretrievable slice of their life again. No matter how silly that first question is or how trivial the contribution, just remember something. The next leader of the project will be one of those people, because every single leader of the project that came to replace a previous leader started, right? There was a day that they did their first thing. My contribution to the Ask a Doctor project was that I fixed a typo, but I've now been leading it for 3 years. So I started out that way too in the projects. Now, how many times have you come into a project and you've been told, yeah, can you use the other front door, please? This is the wrong place to start. Never do that to your community. Okay, be very careful about telling them they did something wrong from the very beginning. The issue tracker, this is the homepage for most people for your project, okay? They don't even see your glorious designed home page, which you had a designer do, or WordPress, or whatever it is. They don't even see it. They don't care, because they have a need, and they say, hey, look, I tried to use your project. I have something. I'm getting right into it. So what you do is they file an issue, at the very first time and you recognize, hey, I've never seen that username before. Hey, welcome. Thanks for coming. Yeah, we'll get to the issue in a second, but thank you for being here. So what you want to do is you want to optimize for that first touch, because you never get a chance to make a second impression, the first impression, as they always say. So you want to optimize for that. You want to always be welcoming newcomers. I mean, growth, what are we talking about today? We're talking about growth. Growth is more people coming in than leaving. Well, you can't have growth if you're not always trying to grow. So that first touch, that's why it's so critical, because it is, in essence, it is the lifeblood of growth. You have to keep having that happen. Now, those are all the kind of I've talked about the normal way that people come into projects. There's another way that they come into projects too. And they come in very passionate. You have to understand that formation and growth is a violent thing. Okay? We're in the business of passion. And passion means that people come in hot. Okay? The earth, as this depicts, was once created by a tremendous collision in space, and our moon sort of came from it. But the idea was that we wouldn't be what we are today if the earth wasn't bombarded with all kinds of comets and other, celestial bodies. That's what brought life to earth. Well, these people that come in hot are bringing life into your project. Okay, so yes, it's dirty in the beginning, but creativity is that way. They're probably, though, more frustrated than they are mad. Keep that in mind. And what you want to do as a project leader, so you say, okay, I'm seeing this situation. What do? You need to give them outlets, right? You need to give them, channel that passion, turn it into productivity, challenge them to do something. Because your responsibility is to make them productive. I mean, if you want to grow, you need to make them productive. If you don't, you failed them, okay? This is absolutely the truth. You failed them if they didn't become productive. Now, the other thing is you'll have dissenters. Now, dissenters, don't alienate and chastise them, okay? Don't be a jerk to them. Be smart. Assimilate them. Assimilate their ideas. Because if they're saying, hey, what you do sucks, I have a much better way of doing it, you go, oh, that's cool. That's an idea. Can I take that idea? We can make our project better. Okay? Be smart about it. Because it's just a waste of breath to, try to fight with them. When you're interacting with people, whether they're dissenters, passionate people, or kind of, more shy newcomers, you never lose points for professionalism. If you're not sure what to do, just don't be an ass, okay? Because that's the quickest way to build a toxic community. And the build is sort of an oxymoron there, because you don't build if you're toxic, okay? So just always be professional. Be professional to a fault. Treat everyone with respect. Employees especially. If you have an open source company, I absolutely think that there's absolutely no excuse that an employee that's working on an open source project treats anybody poorly. If I was running that company, they'd be gone that next day. I don't care. That's a zero tolerance policy for me. There's no reason not to be awesome to your community members. So communication, like at the worst, like if you have a person who's like very, very technically brutal, that's okay, as long as they're personally respectful. So criticize the ideas, not the person. And I'm talking about when you criticize the person, that's zero tolerance for me. Because if the environment is closed or hostile, they're out. And if they're out, your community is going to die. So promote diversity in all ways. So when I was living in Maryland, there was this bumper sticker. Now I've modified here, but it says "Choose Civility" in Howard County. That was what it originally said. And I used to think to myself, like, but that seems like a pretty low expectation that you can just be civil. Like, couldn't you be like nice? Like, couldn't you be, what does that mean? So actually, as it turns out, being civil is actually a little bit more than just not being an ass. It's actually a little bit more than that. And it sort of comes down to being inclusive, acknowledging people, and assuming the best in people, being constructive. Okay, there are these things that make up civility. If you go to the website Choose Civility, you can read all about it. But what's interesting is that is exactly what we need to do to grow open source, is that we need to be civil. We need to do all the things that are in their principles. Because they're building a community, we're building a community too. So the tone you set for your community, it's going to determine its fate. Let's be honest. I mean, they always say, well, that project lead set a nice tone. I mean, if he didn't set a nice tone, well, you might as well just quit, because the community's not going to grow. So put your best attitude forward, and when in doubt, choose civility. Now, once you receive a contribution, acknowledge it. Being thanked feels good every single damn time. People they don't fill up on gratitude. They don't go, I'm good. Actually, I'm kind of full on gratitude today. Like, I'm good. I don't need to be thanked anymore. I'm kind of full. I ate a little bit too much thanks. No. People love it. It feels really good. But you have to do it generously, and you have to do it sincerely. You should be doing it so much that you might as well put a key on your keyboard. And if you know you're doing it right when you practically know the usernames of all your community members by heart. You know, you or everyone collectively in your modules. And you're mentioning them on Twitter. You're mentioning them on GitHub. You're mentioning them in the release notes. Mention. But what this does is it says, hey, contributors, I see you. I appreciate your work. I value your contribution. And you have ownership, which we're going to get to, but you have ownership. And what's funny is that there's no secrets here. Like, I could say this to a group of people, and then I could do it, and the fact that I said it doesn't make it any less meaningful to them. Okay, because this is just how we work as humans. And it also keeps them motivated, right? If you want to sort of motivate someone to go to the next level, you say thank you, and then they sort of have this reaction of, okay, cool, I was thanked, now I'll do the next step. So instead of saying, please do this, please do that, you say thank you. And you don't necessarily ask them what to do next, because they'll bring that, going back to the autonomy, mastery, purpose, they'll bring their own reason for keeping going. So now I want to tell you a little story. And hopefully, if you remember nothing from this talk, what I really hope is this story sticks with you. So I've been working in open source communities for a long time. But I can never quite put my finger on why a community worked, why one worked, why one didn't, what made it tick. And until right here in Antwerp in 2013. So 2 years earlier, Ajlak Knudsen, the lead of the Archelian project, and myself, we were walking with a newcomer to the Archelian community. We were just walking down the Kaiserlei, heading towards a restaurant. And we kind of got to the restaurant. We said, hey, we're going to go eat dinner here. Would you like to join us? And he said, no, I have to go. I'm not a speaker like you guys, and I probably shouldn't join you. I probably can't. And then he kind of walked off. And Ajlak and I looked at each other, kind of bewildered for a second. What's going on here? And then instinctually we agreed, go get him. Go get him. And Ajlak ran off and pulled him back. Bartosz was just as much a part of Archelian as either one of us. His interest that day, that month or whatever, to get involved in Archelian made him just as much of this community as anyone who'd been working on it for years. So you fast forward to 2 years later, Bartosz had become a speaker at Devoxx. He was a Devoxxian. He was speaking, in fact, about getting involved in open source. So that year, we were actually all rooming together in an apartment. And we left the apartment for different times the morning of his talk for reasons that I can share with you. That's a story for Beer Central, okay? But we attended another talk. I was over in one of the other rooms before Bartosz's. And I was chatting with someone in the corridor afterwards, so I got held up. And so I ended up being a few minutes late getting to Bartosz's talk. As I entered into the room monitor is shaking her head at me going, And I'm stepping over people, just to kind of get, these quarters, just to get up enough to see Bartosz standing down on the stage. And the room was completely packed to the backs of the rooms, and there were no seats at all. So 2 years earlier, Bartosz viewed himself as, I'm just another person in the crowd, and I'm not worthy of note. And now, as one of the leadership in the Archelian project, I can't even get into the room to see my community member speaking. We believed in him before he was ready to believe in himself. I mean, we never even questioned it. And now he's a celebrity. I can't even go in to see him. But that is not the amazing part of the story. That's just the intro, right? Because the focus of his talk was to encourage other people to get involved in open source because it had changed his life so much in those 2 years. So about halfway through the talk, he puts up this slide, and it's the names and faces of other open source contributors. And he said, these are the people that inspire me. But they weren't the project leaders. They were other community members. They were other people like him that had come in and joined the project. And he was talking about projects that they worked on. But then he went a step further. Despite only having a quickie, so he's only got a 15-minute talk here, okay? He decides, well, I'm going to give up 5 minutes at the end of my talk, so leaving him only 10 minutes, because there was this guy in the hacker garden that he was working with, who was working on this open source project, and the open source project really inspired him. So he gave him the stage and allowed him to talk about what he was doing, his project, and said, this is the type of thing that I think that, you know, is really amazing about open source, is people that do work like this guy. So at this moment, I realized what it is that makes community work. This is what makes it grow. You're directing the limelight on other people that should be recognized but aren't being recognized yet. You're making opportunities for the other people in the group. And Bartosz had responded to the call of the community to kind of follow in the culture that Ajak and I had sort of started of passing on and helping these people become successful. Then he was doing that for others. So in 2012, Bartosz received a JBoss Community Award for his work on Archillion, and now he's the community manager for Archillion. Remember that first touch thing? You know? So now today, Alex Soto, who is one of the people on the slide, and you can now see in this picture, is the lead of the Archillion Cube project, which is a very critical submodule to Archillion, and he's also the co-author of Archillion in Action, and he's a Devoxian, and he spoke this year more times than I've ever spoken at any conference, okay? So what's good for the community members is amazing for the project. What's amazing for the project is amazing for the community members. By passing on these opportunities, you're investing in the project's future. And what you build is not just a community, because we're talking about growing. No. Okay, growing community, that's not interesting. We grow a devoted community. We grow a community that is bound basically for life, okay? These people are not only working together, they're extremely close friends. And they help each other have new ideas all the time, like Archillion Cube. So recognition is something to be passed on. Each leader has recognition to share. Leaders are going to get attention because their name's on the project. Alex now gets attention because he's working on Archillion Cube, and his name is on the module, and now he's a mirror. He passes on that to other people who deserve the light. And you orchestrate the growth of the community through this, but this is how the community scales. You see, because I said before, being personal, knowing every individual. Yes, and you're going to say to me, hey, after 100 people, how can you keep track of all those people? You don't. You live on through the other contributors, and the other contributors do it, and they do it to other contributors, and that's how it is that you basically get to be everywhere in the project through the culture that you built. And Thomas Jefferson has this famous quote to say, you know, that person who receives an idea from me, they receive that idea and I don't lose anything. It's sort of like a person who lights someone else's candle. Your candle doesn't become more dim because their candle's now lit. And that's exactly what we're talking about. You know, once the community is committed to grow, this is the key. So the other thing that you have to think about is that open source is about you not doing it alone. So you're never going to get to that if at some point you realize you're a wallflower project. You're stuck to the wall. You're always confined to the edges of the pool, so to speak. There are ways to make this less scary. You automate liberally. But in the end, you want to empower people, because that's really what allows your community to have this, for that ownership to scale out, and you aren't limited by your own time and abilities, but you pass it on. But you can't pass it on if you don't give them leadership. So notice I was saying that Alex Soto had become the lead of this module. This is a very important thing in our community building, is that we pass on the ownership of segments of the project to newcomers that come in and show interest. And it's a great way to get lots of leadership. So it's not just one person. Each person has their thing that they maintain, and then they have these mini communities within the community. So what we're doing here is we're promoting contributors into leaders, because trust creates leaders, and leaders become the heroes of your project. So it's about empowerment. I mean, if you think about it, every athlete that's ever existed has had a coach at some point, and coaches help us believe in ourselves before we're ready to believe in ourselves. You know, they're our mentor. And so those are what the community leaders are. They're the coaches. They guide and nudge, and they help the people become productive members of the community. And then they show them, hey, what you do matters. And it matters so much that I want you to be the lead of that thing. So no other way is sustainable. So growing a community isn't something that you want to do. It's really something that you have to do. Or else your project will never get off the wall of the pool. It'll always be confined to that. And success, you know, is something that's the business you're in, right? You're in the business of success. I say no. You're in the business of success for your community, because success is infectious. When people see their peers being celebrated, hey, and they achieve success for being part of a project, where do you think they want to be in that project? The success of the community, it translates into success of the project, and that translates into success of the business. But all that success that comes to the business, that's because you did the main thing well. So if you're not focused on that, you're not doing that well, you're not going to get all those other benefits. You know, we recently celebrated the Back to the Future Day. And one of the things I thought was interesting about Back to the Future, you know, we think of the car, but the other thing was this picture. Every time that the protagonist made mistakes in going back in the past, then the future picture started to fade. Don't let this happen in your community. You may start out with, you know, that energy, and then you sort of say, well, we've had success, so now I'm kind of pulling back a little bit. And as you pull back, what you're going to notice is your community members are going to start fading away. Okay? They were devoted before, they were interested, the activity or project was good, you show less interest, it fades away. So it's going to be very easy to forget about your community as you start having success. And that's the death knell of your project. Do not let that happen. You almost want to treat every phase of your project as the first phase, you know, in terms of how much passion you put into it. And one of the ways we do that is we put up faces of all the contributors that have been a part of the project on the project pages. I don't think there's a reason that there's a project that exists in open source and shouldn't be doing this. Every project should do this. Okay, there's no reason not to. First of all, it's easy to do it, but it's also very important. It's about sharing that prosperity, because sharing the prosperity is what builds the ethos of the project, and it's what allows it to be sustained long term. So look, social events like this one. Are you getting together with just people in your company, and you sort of leave the community members out? Or are you saying, hey, community members, what are you doing for dinner? Let's get together, okay? So you don't want to be above them. You're not above them, just like we weren't above Bartaj, even though he was just starting out. So we came up with this chart that I'll finish up with. This is basically what I think if we put it to sort of a chart, this is our secret for growing communities, is that first you need to inspire them. There's a reason that they're there. And then immediately, as soon as they show up, because you inspire them and they're like, cool, this thing is awesome, I want to be part of it, recognize them. Hello, welcome them, recognize their contribution. But then, that's not enough, you need to encourage them. Can you do a little bit more in the project? You know, I see you, I want you to be part of it. Do you want to do a talk on it? Can I help you do your talk, etc.? There's things you can do, and then empower them. They become eventually leaders. And then, finally, the most important thing is that once you make them leaders, and they do this for the next generation, then your project is able to become sustainable. You want contributors to be successful because they chose to join your community, and you want other people to see that, right? Because if you make them successful, then other people will want to be successful. And that's how you gain devotion. That's how you grow. You care about the individuals. Thank you, and good luck. Namaste.